Shana Tova. And Shabbat Shalom. We can do that too. There is a sticker on the cover of my laptop that cautions all who see me typing away. It says, "Careful, or you'll end up in my sermon." This is that kind of sermon. This is a sermon about our three children. Now, I've never given a sermon about our kids before, and in fact, I have a rule that I do not reference them by name in my sermons or writings. I break that rule from time to time, but in general, I have that rule. It's hard enough being a rabbi's kid, or as we call it in the pray trade, an RK. So when so much of their childhood is on public display, I try not to make more of it. Now, don't get me wrong, there are certainly advantages and benefits to being an RK. I have the clearest memory of my oldest son, our oldest son, Judah, when we were in Los Angeles, and he was on the preschool playground with a posse of his friends, and he instructed them, "Come on, guys, follow me. I know where they keep the oneg cookies." And they ran into the temple kitchen. But still, it ain't easy growing up in the public eye. And so I asked their permission to share the following 3 observations about them that I have made over the past year, because they taught me lessons that I think we could all learn for this new year and for years to come. In Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Rabbis, Rabbi Hanina said, "I have learned much from my teachers and even more from my friends. But from my students, I have learned more than from all of them combined." Our children are, of course, our most important students, and therefore our tradition teaches that they are also our greatest teachers as well. Lesson number 1, deep cuts, finding the hidden jewels buried on the B-side. Last year, for his 15th birthday, Levi, our middle child, who's back there at the tech desk, I make them all come to shul too, but they come because they want to. That's what I tell myself. Levi, our middle child, surprised all of us by asking for a record player for his birthday. And of course, a few vinyl records to go along with it. Now, there is nothing unusual about a 15-year-old wanting to blast music from their bedroom. I can remember many an evening when I would prepare whole playlists of teenage angst and parental protest songs as I tried to create a soundtrack for the heartbreak and the hard-fought battles of my teenage years. It is exactly for those purposes that we have a family Spotify account with unlimited song choices. Now, where I and many of you used to have to thoughtfully and carefully mix tapes from our record collection, or even, remember this, even from the radio, carefully timing the play and record button, right? The play and record button just right so that I could catch the start of the next America's Top 40 song, and cursing Casey Kasem if he talked over the end of that song. Levi and his siblings, they have access to literally an infinite number of songs on their phone, in their pocket, all the time. Anything they imagine they might want to hear is just a few clicks away. And furthermore, those songs are digitally remastered and they are perfectly balanced. No needle drops, no warped cassette tapes that you have to wind with your pencil to get back in, or scratched and skipping records. There's a whole group here that have no idea what we're talking about. They don't have to get up and turn it over to the B-side or even go down to the record store to wait for the newest album to show up on the shelves. Magically, it just appears on their phone, often one more aggressively marketed TikTok trending song after another. And so when Levi asked for a record player, I was curious as to why. And he gave me a typically wise and thoughtful teenage explanation. I don't know. I just want it. We pressed a little further, and he explained that he likes the way a record sounds, the imperfection and the distortion. He likes the needle drop. Scratches feel more authentic, like the scratches and the imperfection that we all have. It was, after all, Leonard Cohen who sang, "Everything has a crack in it. That's how the light gets in." Another album I need to add to his collection. Levi told me he likes holding the liner notes and looking at that big album cover artwork with its layers of context and obscured meaning. He even likes that it doesn't play on forever and ever, that he has to get up and flip it to the B-side. Now, when I went to the used record store to round out his gift with a few records for his core collection, and by the way, Sharon, my wife, lovely, beautiful wife Sharon, who did her hair tonight, looks great. Sharon did the same at another record store, and as an affirmation that I picked the absolutely perfect partner in life, we picked almost all of the same records for our son. When I went to the store, I proudly told the salesperson, who, by the way, is cool just because they work in a record store in the year 2023. I mean, that's just, it doesn't get cooler than that. When I told him that I was buying records for my 15-year-old son who was shunning his iPhone for this analog technology of my own youth, to my surprise, they informed me that I was maybe the 5th parent that had come in that week on a similar mission. David Hayes, a researcher at the Ontario Institute for Studies and Education at the University of Toronto, says that the growing popularity of vinyl records, he means, might be a form of resistance against the music industry's corporate tastemakers. In his research, he actually studied this. Hayes heard from many teens who say that they like a record because it forces them to listen to the deep cuts. Those songs that are not there because they are the top 40 hits, but because the artist knows that they will never be a top 40 hit, and yet still insisted that they be included anyways. In those songs, the listener discovers what algorithm and mass marketing didn't want you to hear. My colleague, Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove, calls this serendipitous stumbling. Not the book or the song that you went into the store or the library looking for, but the book next to it, or the song after it, or the article beside the one that you were initially interested in reading. An on-demand world makes no allowances for the B-side dimensions of life. Because if not for the Beatles' I Am the Walrus, or Rod Stewart's Maggie May, or Prince's Little Red Corvette, and a million other literal and figurative B-sides, our cultural heritage would be rather impoverished, Cosgrove observed. More often than not, learning and culture and, frankly, life itself are to be had not by finding what you thought you were looking for, but by flipping over that proverbial vinyl record to discover that truth and beauty and love are found in the most unexpected of places. The lesson that I learned from Levi's love of vinyl is that sometimes, by not following the herd, you find your new community. That it's in the deep cuts, the B-side, the alternative tracks of records and of life, that we often find the most meaningful things. Not in what we are looking for, but in what we found while we were looking. Now, teens have always been countercultural and nonconformist. We often think of them as trend followers, but really, if you pay attention, they are actually trend setters. They see what is going on with their own mental health. They understand how corporations and mass marketers are tracking and targeting them probably better than we do. And they're trying to make changes. We would be wise to follow them over to the B-side of life. Lesson number 2, setting limits. If you've only got one shot, make it count. I learned a different but equally powerful lesson from our soon-to-be, her birthday is on the 20th, on Wednesday, 12-year-old daughter, Esty. Every summer, she goes to camp, and as per camp rules, has to leave her phone at home. It is traumatic for most kids. Most parents and camp staff equate some of those first days at camp to kids going through some form of detox. And if you watch closely, as I do, as the kids will be in the dining hall or something, they'll reach into their pockets only to discover that they're stuffed with friendship bracelets instead of their phone, and they don't know what to do without Snapchat. We sometimes actually have to teach or reteach our campers how to have face-to-face conversations, how to make eye contact, and how to do active listening. One summer, a few years ago, Esty asked for a Polaroid camera for Hanukkah. Point and shoot cameras are allowed at camp, and so she wanted to take pictures of her friends. Instant cameras, like record players, have had a resurgence, and were a number of new, colorful, and inexpensive models available. The film, however, costs an arm and a leg, close to $2 per photo. So we got her the camera, but only a couple packs of film. And we carefully explained to her how it is not like taking a picture with your phone where you can just press the button a dozen of times until you get that perfect shot. At $2 per shot, you've got to make sure it is something that you really want to capture. You need to frame it just right. For the first time, you have to consider the lighting, the background. You quite literally get only one shot, so you need to make it count. Thoughts of the Hamilton song in the back of my head. So when she came home, she made a photo album of all the Polaroids that she had taken and those that she had traded with her friends. A treasured memory of camp that sits prominently on her shelf and one that she returns to with reverence and joy. She has a phone filled with pictures that she has taken with her friends, none from camp, of course. But they don't mean as much to her as those colorful, faded, important Polaroids, even in their imperfection. The lesson from Esti's Polaroid camera is about our responsibility to set boundaries and limits for our children and for ourselves. Limitations make moments, experiences, and possessions that we do acquire that much more irreplaceable and beautiful. A woman once asked her rabbi a very perceptive question. While studying the first chapters of Genesis, she asked, why is it that God's first commandment to Adam and Eve is a negative commandment? Do not eat of the tree of knowledge. Why didn't God give them a positive commandment instead? And the rabbi answered her, I don't know, for I am not God. Good rabbi answer, by the way. But what I do know is that most of the things that I said to my children in their first years of life were phrased negatively. Don't touch the fire. Don't walk here. Don't run. Don't interrupt, etc., etc. Evidently, in the process of growing up and becoming adults, we need to learn the things that we are not allowed to do before we can learn what we should do. Limits are love. Boundaries are by their very nature defining. The Talmud declares in making limits, one makes blessings. Similarly, 2,000 years ago, the Roman philosopher Seneca wrote, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. He was writing about people who spend their whole life traveling abroad. They end up having plenty of places where they have visited, but no place where they have lived, where they have planted roots. Infinite choice is no choice at all. 100 digital pictures are not more meaningful than just one very intentional Polaroid. They are just more, and probably less. Lesson number 3. With God's helping hand, the book of life is written in ink. The third lesson that I learned from my children this past year comes from our oldest son, Judah. Judah, very much like his father, is tantalized by technology. You've noticed the screens and the cameras. But there's one particular tool that Judah relies upon that is about as old school as you can get. Judah loves fountain pens. Now, I watch him carefully write in his notebook for school or for his various activities, and I realize that people born in the last 30 years who have grown up in a purely digital age are accustomed to typing and erasing, copying and pasting their way through all composition. They can type whatever they are thinking and come back and refine it and edit it again and again later on. But writing with a pen and paper requires more thought. The writer must think through their topic and ideas before they begin setting pen to page. Yes, whiteout and erasable ink still exist, but they can be a pain and they give your work a messy and subpar appearance. But writing by hand, Judah is learning that he can achieve the best results when he organizes his ideas thoughtfully in his mind before committing them to paper. This particular throwback practice offers a different lesson than finding meaning in the deep cuts of Levi's vinyl records or the blessings of boundaries that Esti experiences with a roll of Polaroid film. In Judah's fountain pen, I am reminded of the Jewish custom of writing Bet He as an acronym for the Hebrew words Bezrat Hashem, with the help of God, or Bet Samech Daled, an acronym for the Aramaic phrase B'sayata Dishmaya, with the help of heaven. If you've seen that maybe at the top of every handwritten letter, and some even type it at the top of their emails. I haven't seen it yet on Facebook or Twitter, and maybe that's the problem and the lesson of Facebook and Twitter. The practice is very much connected to the careful thought that we are commanded to put into what we commit to paper, the historical act being akin to making a promise or a vow, because it lives on forever. And when you think about it, even in the digital age when our social media posts will follow us from university application to job interview, to our dating life and beyond, the thought and intention that we should put into what we write down or even what we type onto a screen would most certainly benefit from God's helping hand. We generate and publicize by hand or by finger tapping more words and more feelings than perhaps any era in history. In 1500 CE, in the Common Era, the printing press took Judah's ancient act of scribing ink to paper and permitted its mass reproduction. 500 years later, personal computers reached the mass market, and almost overnight, a powerful leap in the human ability to transmit, to store, and to share information in real time refashioned numerous aspects of life, and it did so irreversibly. The impact of our written words has never been more powerful and potentially more harmful. And so on this night of Rosh Hashanah, as we prepare to write the next chapter in the story of our life, making the final edit on the chapter that is just now being completed, God prepares to inscribe our names in Sefer HaChaim, in the book of life. Our Machzor, our prayer book, reminds us that everything is written and everything is recorded. Everything is numbered and counted. The great ledger and record book of life is opened this very night before it will be sealed on Yom Kippur. The lesson that I learned from Judah's fountain pen is that we should think very carefully before we put pen to page or keystroke to screen, or before we take any action that cannot be so easily undone or erased. If we organized and considered every word we wrote and shared, let alone those words that we speak and those things that we do, just as one does when they have no ability to backspace, erase, copy, paste, undo, and delete, we might truly come to understand the pleading of the prayer, "O God, guard my speech from evil and my lips from speaking deceit." As I reflect on what my children and my students who have really become my teachers have taught me this past year, I think there are profound insights that can guide me and many of us through the new year that is ahead. That there is beauty and meaning to be found in places that we must seek out, beyond what's placed right in front of us. Look for the deep cuts, the serendipitous stumbles that reveal what was hidden in plain sight. That by setting boundaries and accepting constraints, we enable ourselves and we enable our children to value the weight and importance of our choices and to cherish even the blurry moments as special and worth treasuring. Focus on what is most important and then capture that moment. And that by slowing down, by measuring our words and actions, considering our intention behind them, the impact of what we say and do remains as potent as ever. That our careful crafting deserves the guiding hand of the divine, that we may be inscribed for good in the book of life. In this new year, may we venture into the deep cuts of life, seeking the profound amidst the ordinary, establishing boundaries that nurture meaning and connection, finding richness in the deliberate and the finite. And in all we do, may we unearth the extraordinary within the ordinary, setting boundaries that focus on what's important. And may we write our stories and share our thoughts with the intention and care befitting the sacred power of our relationships. Shana Tova.